completely different life.
Yes, you did. My name is Patinkin. I am the owner and president of Patinkin Research Strategies based out of Lake Oswego. Happy to be here. Jake and I today are going to go through sort of campaign 101, I would say. So I'll hand it off to him. He's going to do the first half, and then I'll do the second portion, and then I think we'll have time for Q&A, maybe some exercises, etc. For folks in the back, feel free to slide on in. I think there's some standing room over here. So hopefully you can all make yourselves comfortable.
All right. I just want to start talking a little bit about Hilltop. We're a national consulting firm. We specialize in campaigns, coalition building, grassroots organizing, communication strategy. As you can see, we have offices across the United States. I run the Oregon office with my colleague Colin Cochran. I'm a native Oregonian, worked in Texas on a governor's race, the Democratic National Committee, Senator Wyden, and I'm currently consultant to Ted Wheeler's mayoral campaign. So let's talk a little bit about bonds. And I will say, our goal today is to have this be particularly helpful for you. We're going to give you the template, but the more we can get into helping you with the specifics of your situation, the better. So as questions come up, please write them down. We want to have about 40 minutes for discussion at the end. So let's make sure we can actually get into giving you guys some real tangible help today as you get started on thinking about a bond conversation. So how do we do that? Successful bond campaign really begins with a plan for success. It is simply not possible to do everything you'd like to do. And if you don't have a plan, you're in a reactive posture, which means that you're having the school board coming to you with questions, and you're having your committee come to you with questions, and you're having people in the community come to you with questions. And as you're trying to just keep up with the pace of responding to that, you're never achieving your strategic goals. And so today we're going to talk about how you build and implement that plan to use the resources and the time you have effectively to pass a bond. And Ben's information is going to be really critical for helping kind of understand where people start out, because that's where we need to go in campaigns. We understand where people are right now and how we're going to get them to where we need them to be by the time it's time to vote. So how do we do that? Let's talk about the rules of the road for any kind of campaign. First is, time is the most precious commodity you have. No matter what day you set until election day, even if you plan 4 years out, you will be shocked when that day arrives and it's right around the corner. And once you start looking backwards, you only have so many days, so many hours. Plus, I can imagine most of you don't have a presidential type campaign staff to implement these ballot measures. It's probably you and some of your friends sitting around a kitchen cabinet figuring out how, between work and family and everything else in your lives, where's the time to get all this stuff done. And so really picking and choosing how you use that time is critical. Second piece is you really need to take stock of your assets and identify your liabilities. These are the natural advantages you have and the challenges you're going to have to overcome. So some things, just for example, that I've encountered in some previous bond measures, I'll bring up a conversation and say, well, we really need to get labor involved, and then I've learned that the district involved is in an ongoing labor dispute, and is at a contract negotiation that's been going on for 2 years and is still in gridlock. That would have been good to know as a liability at the beginning of the conversation, right? Because now you need to understand how inclined is labor going to be to support you. Or maybe if there was a very controversial topic about the school district or a decision that was made, I'm sure you all have encountered these in your lives, thinking about how that's informed people's perception of the district is a really good starting point. Third thing, you really need to prioritize and do certain things well. You will have a billion neat, exciting ideas of different things you could do to promote the bond, to promote the need to improve the schools. You will not have the ability to do all those great ideas, because as I mentioned, it's only going to be you and some folks in your kitchen cabinet and your volunteer base. And so picking and choosing what activities are the most valuable for you and how they really will help get you to where you need to be is a critical area of success. And trying to do a few things well is going to be better than just trying to do a bunch of stuff in a kind of slapdash sort of way, because then that's not going to have the desired outcome. Next is focus on your key messages. That we always kind of tend to overestimate the amount of information that your average voter has when they're going to go to the polls, because we're immersed in it, right? This is our lives, working in a school district, working on this issue, and so we feel like we have a lot of information, and most people do too. Well, the reality is a lot of people don't have much information, and so rather than trying to give them the crash course and get them up to your level of education, think about what are the key things that you want them to take away when it's time for them to vote. And then be repeating those things over and over and over again. There's a reason why you see TV ads and they'll see a car ad commercial 5, 7, 8, 10 times, because we know that you have to repeat something that many times before it really sinks into people. And so if you're having focused messages that offer that repetition, you're going to get a lot more success in having a voter actually understand that. And last is invest your resources where you have the most value. Like I said, most of you probably aren't being able to run a multi-million-dollar campaign with billboards and door knockers and TV ads and all that stuff. And so thinking about what of the limited resources are available, how you can get the most bang for the buck is really a part of the conversation. So let's go into kind of a few things about the 5 elements of a campaign that I really would encourage you all to think about as you're building this thing. Audiences, messages, messengers, your channels for communication, and your roles. And I'm going to go through each of these individually. Audience. Who are we talking to? Any communications or engagement strategy starts out by figuring out who are we actually going to talk to. And in a bond measure, that means we're talking to voters, right? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to be giving you the thumbs up or thumbs down on renovating your facility. And more specifically, it's talking to likely voters, because let's remember, in the best case scenario, if you're going to go out in a presidential election in November of this year, you're maybe going to get 60 to 70% of eligible voters for going to cast ballots. If you're going to go out in a primary election, like May this year, you're probably going to get about 40%, 45% of the voters that are actually going to bother to vote. And if you're going to go out, say, November of next year in 2017, then you can be down in the range of 10 to 20% of the voters actually bothering to cast ballots. And so if you can focus on who are those people who vote every time, that's going to allow you to have a little more effective communication. So, what do voters know about the work of your district? This would be better if I was. The truth is, probably not a lot, right? You, in your case, are typically encountering about 20% of the people in your community, because those are the parents, those are people who are regularly engaged in the work that your schools does. About 80% of your voters are not interacting with the schools on a regular basis. They may see something in the paper, they may hear from you periodically in a community meeting, but it's not a part of their day-to-day life. And so realizing that unlike the parents that you're interacting with, which I'm sure have way more information than you even need them to have, and can be a challenge managing all the information that your parents have about the district or misinformation, the reality is that your non-parents, and the majority of your voters, aren't going to be that engaged. They may know some general stuff, they see some stuff in the paper, but it's not a day-to-day part of their life. So think about, as you're starting to understand that audience, a little bit more about your district. Think about the age and the demographics, which is really critical. The older people are, the more likely we are to vote. In a typical campaign, we almost never talk to someone who looks like me, because I'm just too young, and people my generation don't vote. It's people who are in their 40s, 50s, and particularly 60s and 70s that vote. And this is, one of the jokes that I make when I'm talking to school boards is, in an ideal world, you'd want to pick the election where only the young, tax-receptive people were going to vote. Those elections don't exist, unfortunately. What we do have is elections where those people show up in addition to the older, more tax-conscious voters. And so it's really trying to understand who that audience is and try and get at. You want to look at your voter makeup. Obviously, Democrats tend to be a little more tax acceptant than Republicans. I hope I'm not shocking anybody's world when I say that. And so looking at the partisan split of your district will also help you understand kind of the general receptiveness, and also about what kind of messages we're going to need to communicate. I'd also look at the geographies of your district. This is something that I'm sure goes into the conversation about planning of any kind of bond proposal. If it's only going to benefit certain parts of the district, and particularly districts that span across multiple communities, I'm sure you all are well aware of the kind of tension that can create. Why isn't my district, or why isn't my part of the district, or why is my town not getting the benefits of the bond? And so thinking about those challenges and how you're going to negotiate them is very important. Also think about your constituencies, and this goes beyond just voting. These are the potential allies that you're going to have out there. And so think about your business community, labor, elected officials, community groups, anyone who's going to really have an interest in this bond, either positive or negatively, and how we're going to start communicating. And then also think about who are the supporters, who cares about this measure. Because again, you're not going to have an unlimited checkbook in this type of campaign to just send endless amounts of mailers and endless amounts of TV. You're going to need people like the kids at the schools, or the people who use that school for community activities, who will see the benefits of the bond, to engage them in your campaign, have them be your supporters, have them be your messengers on the ground, have them be knocking on doors, making those phone calls within the grassroots. So let's talk about messages. What are we going to say? First is that impressions matter. First impressions matter, right? We know that from general life. You need to know the best way to make your case for the bond from the start. And there's no really substitute for polling. Ben's going to talk a little bit more about that. But I think it's really important to understand kind of where voters are at, what messages they respond to. And you can hire a lot of smart folks like me that think we know what the right message is. There's really no substitute for a poll, because a poll tells you what people actually think. And that's where we need to start the conversation right now. What we think they know, what we think they should know, but what they actually know and what's going to move them. And so that's why a polling conversation is really critical. So, what kind of messages do resonate? The benefits, or the bennies as we call them in the industry. The way you're going to sell your bond, the way you're going to get people support of your bond, is by focusing on what good comes out of the bond. What difference it's going to make in student learning, facility safety, community engagement, whatever those cases that you can come up with, that's the case to make for the bond. Yes, it's great to talk about that it's going to be $100 million, or that these facility improvements are going to happen, or that it's going to be this level of tax level on your community. That's all fine and good, but what really is going to matter to those voters is what difference does this make in my life? You're asking me to pay for something, so what am I getting for what I'm paying for here? So focusing on the benefits is really a critical part of this conversation, because if we get lost in the process, then we lose that. And again, that's what voters care about. There you go. So think about enhancing and preserving services, improving the quality of life of the community, threats, we're going to have to close the high school, we're going to lose the pool, we're going to have to close the track, whatever those things are. And again, this could be also framed in terms of if we don't act, here's the cost of inaction. But always frame it in terms of what are the benefits that will be occurring to the community if they do make this investment. Next is ensuring consistent messaging. As I mentioned earlier, voters are bombarded with information. And that's not just in the political world, although there's a lot of different campaign stuff happening, but it also is all over our life. We have limitless amounts of information flowing at us. We have our phones that are now streaming information, TV, the web, everywhere else. This information is all around us. And so you need to make the best case you can the first time, and also make the same case over and over and over again to people, because that's what's going to take to actually resonate with the public and have them do that. So think about a consistent core message that's repeated throughout your campaign, but also think about tailoring those messages to specific audiences, right? If you're going to a business community presentation, or if you're going to talk to parents, they're probably going to have a particular concern about this. And so although you want to have your consistent overarching message, also think about adding in some specifics to those conversations that really resonate with the audience you're talking to. And also think about preparing arguments. You know what your opponent's argument's going to be, or hopefully you should. Well, we already pay too much taxes already. Can't you just cut the waste, fraud, and abuse of the district and then save money that way? It seems like you guys have all these nice bells and whistles. Can't you just get back to core services? I'm sure these are not new conversations for any of you. But think about what those are and how you're going to engage those conversations when they happen, so that you're ready and the people you're putting out there to have these conversations are able to respond to them. Messaging topics. I think Ben may talk a little bit more about this. At the end of the day, the reason why you're stacking up all those benefits is because you're going to have to put down a price tag for people at some point. They're going to have to pay for this. It costs money. And so framing it in terms of the context of the benefits is really critical. I think the average cost is a really helpful way to put it. That typically it'll be $1 per 1,000 assessed value. Also think about the opportunity costs in terms of framing this of inaction. So for instance, a lot of recent bonds have seen emphasis on the low interest rates right now, so that you're actually able to save the taxpayer a bunch of money by doing this financing now, or that maintenance will actually escalate if we continue to put off these decisions. And then also, I'm sure you all are aware of the value of the replacement bond. the arguing that this is not a new tax increase, this is simply maintaining your existing tax loads. And so all of these are ways that you can provide to kind of cushion that price tag, because at the end of the day, you are asking people to invest and make to spend this money. And so you need to be able to articulate what exactly they're getting for it and give them some more context about why this is a good buy. Right? Think about your car commercial. Yes, it's all about, look, it goes fast and it's shiny, but they've also got all those arguments they put in there of, oh, it's the end of the year financing, or we have 0% down. They're always trying to frame it as, not only is this a great value for you, but you're getting a really good deal. And so think about both of those elements as you're trying to message your phone. Also think about messengers. Who's going to talk for us? When we're bombarded with information, we need ways in our society to kind of discern the information coming at us. And the ways that we do that a lot of times is we're looking for trusted messengers. And we're looking for people that we think know about this issue, have some expertise, and we have a personal relationship with them. And so, who gave us that information has almost as much value as who's going to say it. And as I said, most of your voters are not direct users of your services. They don't go to schools, or they may not notice the value of those services in the community. And so you want to think about building a campaign strategy that recruits different messengers to try to resonate with them. So for instance, if you're going to try and pass a school bond and you're out wanting to do conversations with the business community, maybe the goal is to find some folks who are on your school board or on your advisory committee who are business leaders themselves. And so they can go to that audience and say, as a business leader, I think this is worth investing in. Or as a business leader, I see the value in us having a quality educated workforce. And this is a really important way for us to get there. And so finding those messengers who can represent you and be trusted in different communities is a really important way to start to get your message out. Potential messengers, here's some examples. I'm sure there are plenty more you can come up with. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, law enforcement. When you look at data from Pew Research and other kind of institutions, they show those are some of the most trusted professions in our community. These are the people that we trust acting in the public interest. And so anytime a teacher, a nurse, firefighter, a law enforcement person tells you it, you tend to trust that. Think about the business community, as I mentioned. That's really obviously a critical bank of support, or potentially a really dangerous liability for you if they come out in opposition. Faith and civic leaders, again, another trusted member of your community. And that's also, I'll also say there that we know that there are folks in our community that are highly engaged, and that the people around them are saying, hey, what do you think about this bond? Because they know that they're the people who are going to the community meetings, who are reading the paper, who are highly following all this information. And so if you can persuade those people and turn them into your own advocates, you are able to kind of create spokespeople within the community that are then able to get your message out. Elected officials, not always the most popular of folks. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But nevertheless have a very important, credible role in the community and can be out there. And also talking to particular audiences, because again, people know elected officials bring some cachet and some credibility and some influence to the conversation. And then think about your board members. Again, your board members are elected representatives of your community. They've obviously stood for election and they're highly engaged. So they're another valuable set of messengers to get out there. Let's talk about channels. So now that we've figured out what we want to say and who we're going to have say it, how are we going to get it to our audiences? Campaign needs to select how to best reach these audiences. There's always going to be more ways you can be communicating than you have time or capacity to actually do. So it's a question of how do you really prioritize these efforts. So think about, there are a lot of different ways. Your district communications are probably a really valuable tool that you already have, that you're regularly talking, again, to about 20% of your voters, and maybe the larger community periodically. Think about the local press and earned media opportunities. You want to frame this story when you're first talking about the bond and proactively approach your local media and try and tell that story. You might also want to place an op-ed or go sit down with the editorial board and try and get them to give it the seal of approval from the get-go. Think about community groups, going out and talking to neighborhood associations, other interested parties. You could also do grassroots work. Think about just simply going door to door, phone banking, or doing events in the community. Those are all ways that you can get your message out that don't cost a lot of money, right? Because they just take your time and effort. They don't have a big price tag. Website is, I think, a really critical item. I will say website is kind of it's a tricky thing, because you can put a lot of time into it and make it really beautiful and fantastic, but if no one is visiting that website, then obviously you didn't have that much of an impact. So I think it's really important to build a website. It's also just as important to figure out ways to drive people to visit that website. So putting it out there in the discussion, encouraging people to visit, and is a really critical resource. Social media, I am a big fan of Facebook, particularly in these type of campaigns, because one of the things that people trust most is their neighbors and the people that are their friends, and that's a really good way to get people to promote to their friends and neighbors the bond. And so by Facebook and to a lesser extent Twitter and even email, you can actually start a conversation with people over time. You can give them more information, have them get more involved, and so that by you convert them from being kind of undecided to being supporters, and then hopefully by the time we move towards election period, to actually being advocates. So then they're putting out messages to their personal network, to their neighborhood, saying, hey, I really support the bond, I really hope you will too. And again, yes, you can throw some money on there to advertise, but if you put the time in, you can do it all for free, as we all do on our Facebook pages. Direct mail is not free. It costs money. It can be fairly pricey. You can look at prices from anywhere from 50 to 75 cents for each postcard you put out. But it's a really critical tool to target, because again, it allows you to focus on just those likely voters, which may be as little as 20% of the total voters in your community. It also allows you to do some tailored messages, right? You can send one message that really appeals to senior citizens who may be more likely on a fixed income and cost conscious, and so they're really like, can I afford this? Whereas you could send a separate message to parents or people of parenting age like me and say, hey, this is gonna make education better in our communities for your kids. Direct mail also has the advantage that it's one of the ways to get to older voters. They actually read their mail, unlike us younger types. And so it's a really cost-effective way to hit that audience specifically. Other channels, paid TV, radio, digital advertising, all of which can be fairly pricey. It is hard to do those on a budget, but they do have some definite value in getting out to a larger audience. Next thing I want to talk about, roles. And we are getting to the end of my half, so don't worry. Once you've got your plan together, you figured out what you want to say, who you're going to say it to, who's going to be doing it, how you're going to be doing that communication, it's really important to include in that plan specific roles of how it's going to get done. Because again, if you have a plan and say, and then we'll do this, it's not going to get implemented, right? But if it's Jake's going to do this, and Ben's going to do that, and then we're going to meet back in a week and make sure it gets done, you need to have that level of accountability because, again, people have busy lives, they have other things going on, and so creating that structure for accountability is really important to actually implement the plan. And the way I recommend to do that is you build a steering committee. I think it's really valuable to bring a group of folks together, to have a conversation, to have them feel like you're working and building collaboration here. It's not like that committee needs to meet every week, but having them in collaboration and conversation, having clear roles established, also having a decision-making process, because you will come to decisions during the campaign. Are we going to invest our resources here? We're going to do this. Do we want to shrink the size of the bond to make it easier to pass? These are all big decisions that you're going to come to along the way, and you need to have a way to make that decision move forward together. And you also need to have accountability. Again, you need to have a structure where everyone comes back and says, hey, Jake, remember said you were going to send out those emails, and I say, oh yeah, I did, but the Seahawks were doing well, so I just kind of watching that, but I'll get it done tonight. You need to have that structure created so that people can actually follow through on what they're going to do. Also really important to identify your volunteer base. You may have steering committee members who can really do that time, and I gotta tell you that is a lot of hard work. It is about 80% picking up the phone, calling people and saying, would you come out and go door to door today? Or would you come out and phone bank for us next week? And so having that person on the steering committee with that time, that energy, extrovert and likes to talk to people can be a really critical way to get your volunteer base mobilized. Last piece also your steering committee needs to do is talk about hiring consultants and staff. That is a completely dependent conversation on the budget for your campaign. If you have $20,000 to run your bond measure, don't hire folks like us because you're going to spend all your money on us and then there won't be anything left to actually talk to voters. The goal today and the other materials out there is if you're running that level of campaign, to give you the playbook to do this on your own. Now maybe you want to hire someone for a particular part of that campaign, like your mail. That's one piece that I always tell people is even if you're running a $20,000 campaign, that mail that you're going to communicate really matters, right? Because you don't have the money to do 15 mail pieces to them. You maybe have 1 or 2 postcards you can do. So make that mail really good. Work with someone who knows how to effectively communicate to an audience and really get voters persuaded with that message. And so it really depends on the budget and the staff and the capacity you have. But that would be kind of part of the steering committee needs to work through is where are you going to invest your limited resources and where do you want to bring in some additional professional expertise to really to motivate. If you have the money to hire a full-time campaign manager, great. Obviously that's going to be that much more work that can get done on the campaign, but think about the trade-offs of what that's going to mean in terms of the rest of the money you have for the campaign. Last thing I just want to say is I really want to make a point about education versus advocacy, because I recognize that I'm here presenting to OSBA. This includes both district staff and school board members. Luckily, school board members and elected officials have a little more freedom to do what they want, but for staff and employees, it is really critical to draw a sharp line between work you're doing about educating people about the bond and doing advocacy for the bond. And so again, education is all about providing information. This is how much the bond costs. If we pass the bond, we will fix this facility, and we will do these things. It is strictly an informational base. It's not, and therefore you should support this, and we hope you will vote for this, and we hope you'll get involved. All of those kind of advocacy things are where you start to get into a lot of trouble. And one negative story about how the district with engaging in political behavior can really mess up your whole strategy. So I really encourage people to think carefully about this. The Secretary of State's office does a great job being able to review communications and look at them to make sure that there's nothing objectionable that can be construed politicking. And so I think that's always a really kind of good safeguard to include at your district level, is make sure that communications about the bond are getting reviewed by Secretary of State so you aren't actually stepping us up outside of the bounds. So that's what I have so far. I'm going to turn it over to Ben, and then we will have a group discussion.
Well, again, thank you for having me here. Jake just did a great job of rolling through the nuts and bolts of a campaign, how you pull together, how you structure message, what you start talking about, who you have deliver message, how you deliver said message. So what I'm going to do is go the next step and help you figure out how to develop the narrative that you will be using, whether it's on the education phase of your campaign or not, the education phase of your effort, or the persuasion campaign phase of your effort. A little bit about my firm first. Patinkin Research Strategies is a national consulting firm. I do work across the country. A lot of my school-based work is in the Pacific Northwest and in, on the West Coast in particular. But we do work for clients up and down the ticket, statewide ballot initiative campaigns, statewide candidates, local candidates. I work for Jules Bailey's Portland mayoral effort, so we get to have a little bit of fun back and forth on that from time to time. Amongst friends. But so anyways, you know, I've been working in this state since, 2001. So I've conducted dozens, scores of focus groups and polls across Oregon, both for statewide campaigns as well as for local efforts such as yours. Suffice to say, I've talked to tens of thousands of voters and have a good feel, I think, for voters within the state. Before I dive in before I dive into what I want to do, I want to relate a story, because I think that'll give you a good sense of how to think about your developing efforts as you're thinking about how to put, you know, do I want to put something on the ballot? Do I want to put a bond out there? How do I do it? How do I talk about it? I'm going to go out of state because I think that makes everyone more comfortable. So I'm doing work right now for the school district of Helena in Montana. They have about 30,000 voters. There's an interesting divide within the district. You have Helena proper, which is filled with all of the liberal government workers. And then you have the valley, where there are no, the county is far more conservative. You have no development impact fees. That place is growing rapidly, and they don't have the infrastructure to, and within the school district, to meet that growth. And so they've needed to do a bond. They needed to do a bond for quite some time. And their process is very similar to all of yours. They have to do the demographic study to get a sense of, where is growth happening, how do they address it. They have to do a facilities assessment. How are our schools doing? How are our buildings? Then they do a long-term visioning process, and then they do put together a bond committee, make final recommendations to their board, and then move forward with the campaign. They executed all of that flawlessly in 2014, and then they lost handily in November of 2014.
Wow.
What did they do wrong? Anyone? What did they do wrong?
They
Yes.
possibly didn't communicate with the community at large.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they went out and they had conversations with folks, but frankly, they didn't. It wasn't exactly that they didn't communicate. They didn't listen. They didn't take the time to go out and understand, well, where are our voters? Where are our parents? And the end result was that they wanted to, in order to meet that growth, they had to consolidate some schools within the city, which is where all their liberal base was, which ticked off liberal parents within the city, which ended up resulting in a significant portion of what would normally pass a school bond voting no, because they didn't want their schools closed. They didn't go out and have a conversation with historical preservationists within the community, which actually, believe it or not, represent quite a large quite a hefty subgroup within the community. They had a number of schools that needed desperate help, frankly needed to be torn down, but they are historically valued within the community. They didn't talk to these folks. They said, let's tear them down, let's build something new. Those people voted no. So they, the community fractured, and the end result, because the school district did not listen, and the end result was they didn't get their bond passed, so they have to start over at square one. And I can tell you right now, I'm sure Jake would agree, there is nothing worse than trying to pass a bond after your voters have already said no. Because then they'll say, well, didn't we just say no? So moral of the story is, go out and spend time listening. So that's why we have it up here. Before you embark on a bond process, first seek to understand your audience. And when we say first, that means like listening sessions before, while you're doing the demographic study. But I mean, frankly, way ahead of the game. Go out and listen. And it's not about asking folks what, it's not about, telling them what you want to do. It's more about just asking questions. Saying, what are the core values that you hold dear? Try and understand the values that they think about when they're thinking about their schools, so you can communicate with them where they are, not the other way around. Ask questions about, what interests need to be recognized as your district plans for the future. Again, Helen example, they didn't think about the vested interests of people that cared about culturally valued school buildings. They didn't think about the vested interests of parents who really liked their smaller schools. And that as a result, they didn't try and communicate and sell their vision. The end result was failure. What residents value about their current schools. So just try and understand, what do you like about them? How do they make your community tick? What residents want to gain from your proposed bond. So it's not just about what do they like about their schools, what are the vested interests, what are your core values, so that we make sure we're speaking with them and communicating shared values. It's about, what do you aspire to for your community? Because frankly, that's what bonds are. You're building facilities that are going to educate a community's children for decades to come. And so there's a lot of aspirational visioning involved here. So it's understanding what your community aspires to. Not just what, policy-wise, what might make the most sense, but making sure that that also matches with where voters are. And so then what would a successful bond look like? You've now identified, the vision for the future. How do you structure your bond so that you can make it so that it meets all of those things? It meets voters' desires, but it also meets what you know is needed within the community. And it might mean sacrifices. It might mean that you can't do everything at once. It might mean that you can't do a certain project because it's very clear from what you've heard when you've gone out and talked with folks, whether it be listening sessions, focus groups, or polling, frankly, all three together. It might be that you can't do everything that you want to do, but at least then you're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. So, why do we ask these questions? Again, because you need to meet voters where they are. We need to construct a bond that doesn't reflect the core values and constructing a bond that doesn't reflect the core values and aspirations of the community will set your efforts back. It's like trying to again fit a square peg into a round hole, and getting that initial read on the values, concerns, priorities, and aspirations of your audience is critical so that you can then start developing your narrative. Sorry. So why should we work to draw listening sessions? Everyone. Oh, who should we work to draw to the listening sessions? Everyone. Don't just try to communicate with your PTOs or PTAs. Don't talk to staff alone. You should talk to both. Frankly, both are the most important groups. But as Jake said, and as I'll note in a second, a significant portion of your audience doesn't have any sort of relationship with the schools at all. So when you are going out and having conversations with folks and listening to what they have to say, make sure that you are communicating broadly and strongly so that you can hear from everybody within your community, not just those involved within the schools. And here's why. Jake referred to this a little bit earlier in his presentation. Give or take, every community is different, every district is different. But when it comes down to it, about 70 to 80% of your audience is not going to have any sort of relationship with the schools. Maybe they've been, at least currently. I would say that some of them have had kids go through the schools and are no longer connected, so they might have a tenuous link. And they tend to be a little bit more supportive than others who have never had kids in schools. But you're going to have around 20 to 30% of voters who have kids within the schools right now. And I would add a little bit of a clarification to what Jake noted a little earlier. Even that 20 to 30% isn't reliable. Because the fact of the matter is, I'm a parent. I've got friends in the schools, first grade parents, and I can tell you the vast majority of them not really paying that much attention. They've got practices to go to. They've got work. They've got to put dinner on the table. Paying attention to what's happening at a school board meeting or what's going on within the district as a whole, it's just not on their radar screen. So they might be more amenable. They might be more willing to listen to what you have to say, but you still have to get in front of them because frankly, and unfortunately, because they are younger, they don't vote either. So they might be registered, but you got to make sure that they show up because typically they're only going to vote maybe in just this upcoming election in November. That's probably the only election they'll show up on, which is an even year general election. So keep that in mind as well. So next, who should you message to? All right, we've got our narrative. We understand that we need to go out there and listen. We need to understand that we want to have shared values. We want to identify people's priorities or aspirations for their community. Who are we talking to when we go out and do this? And I want to stress again as we go through this, what Jake said earlier, there is the education piece to this and then there's a persuasion piece to this. A lot of what you're about to see is very persuasion oriented, but as Jake said, you can tweak that pretty darn easily and still have a really good education conversation with your electorate. So who should you message to? Number one, do you want to talk to identified yes voters? No, you do not want to talk to identified yes voters. Reason being, they're voting yes. You don't need to persuade them. The only reason why you would go out and talk to them is because you'll be working with someone like Jake to say, okay, these are the people most likely to vote yes. They're parents, they're renters, they're Democrats. Hopefully all of the people that you talk to within those groups have good voting records. You go out and you have conversations with them about showing up to vote because you're going to count on them to get you to 50+1 on election day. Do you want to talk to no voters? No, you do not want to talk to no voters. Reason being, they're voting no. And when you think about, voting as a scale, think about it attitudinally in terms of a person's just like how they're going to react to a conversation. If they're down at no, it's going to be a lot harder to move them through the course of a conversation, whether it be telling them why a bond may be needed in terms of just the education, or trying to do more of a persuasion effort. You have to take them from no to no, not strongly, to undecided, to yes, not strongly, to yes, strongly. I'm going to go out and I'm going to vote for this because I really like that. That's like 5 steps right there. That's really hard to do. It's expensive to do. It's not worth your time. You have so many other people that are more amenable to you, and those people are identified undecided voters. These folks typically tend to be NAV, so non-affiliated voters on the voter file. They're registered that way. They tend to be, say, older women, typically, maybe younger men, so to sort of fit into those scales there. But anyways, polling will help you identify who they are. Door-to-door effort could do that too. But the fact of the matter is, you want to spend your time talking to the people you need to persuade to vote yes on election day. Now again, for an education effort, you have to talk to everybody. But you would also pick the mediums through which you talk to. Again, as Jake was saying, you can put information out through your school buildings, through PTAs, PTOs. You can do it through social media efforts targeted to your geographic district. There are so many different ways you can put the word out to reach those undecided voters. It's going to be scattershot on the education piece, but that's where you're really going to get the bang for your buck. And just always remember, as part of this narrative, that the story that you're weaving through the course of your campaign, Jake talked about this earlier, I'll say it again, you are trying to sell something. That's the way you should think about it. You are trying to sell a bond. And so how would you try and do something when you're trying to sell something? You're going to talk to them about FTE. Are you going to talk to them about, use all sorts of abbreviation like that? No, you're going to try and keep it simple. And you're going to describe what you want to achieve in plain English. Don't talk about STEM, don't talk about STEAM. You talk about science and technology, engineering and math. You lay it out in words that people get and understand, because they're just not involved in your day-to-day. They just don't have that level of expertise. You need to make it clear that the things they're buying are things that they would like to buy. So it's safety. It's smaller enrollment or class sizes. It's 21st century classrooms. It's basic repairs. These are some of the broader categories. You need to tell them what they're going to get for their money. And frankly, start with that and then talk about how much it's going to cost them. You want to sell them on the goodies, the bennies that you are delivering, and then tell them how much it costs. And then you need to reassure them constantly, once you've told them of the amount, you need to reassure them that their money is going to be spent efficiently and accountably, which is why we'll talk about in a minute about making sure that ballot caption and question includes words like requires audits or citizen oversight, things like that that really make it clear that, hey, my money is going to be well taken care of. But let's start with the values. And I will say this: when you're thinking about a message or just a basic statement, there are study after study will show that a strong statement doesn't start with or doesn't just include statistics. It doesn't just include core values that we all live by. It includes both of those things. And so as you're going through and as you're thinking about, well, how am I going to communicate this to people that aren't paying any attention, think about the statistics that matter, think about the value, the shared values that you all hold, weave them together, and then develop your narrative. And here's some of the things that typically will come up when people think about schools when I do focus groups. So it's opportunity, creating opportunity for children to thrive. Frankly, creating opportunity for communities to thrive. When you have strong schools, you're going to attract more businesses. When more businesses come, you're going to create more jobs. So you have thrive, you have accountability. We talked about that. Family, stronger schools, stronger buildings foster a child's chance to get ahead. You weave family into that. Quality of life, Jake talked about that earlier. Responsibility, you're going to be responsible with voters' tax dollars. Equity, depending on what you're doing, you can talk about making sure that every child has the same opportunity, or an equitable opportunity to get ahead and succeed. Because maybe that's not the case right now. Maybe some buildings are better than others based upon what your bond schedule looks like. Safety, that doesn't get more basic than that. Are all your buildings up to modern earthquake standards? Do they have the security cameras, locking mechanisms, et cetera, to make sure that, you know, gosh forbid, if there's an active shooter situation, that your facilities are prepared. Fire safety. All these things typically are way up there in terms of what people are willing to pay for, and then also just success, creating success in your community. And that can frankly be an operations levy as much as it could just be a general obligation bond. So next, messages at work, communicating the basics. I'm going to run through a few messages here that get to, you know, a number of different themes. And again, no district is the same. All districts are different. Though there might be some threads to messaging that might be similar, this is just to give you an idea of how do you develop the conversation here. So number one, overcrowding. Many of the schools in our district are well above capacity. This bond will add classroom space and build improved schools that ensure greater equity, giving students more access to classes, more personalized attention, and more sports and clubs, helping to ensure they don't fall through the cracks. Now, I've underlined things in all of these messages that I'm about to roll through. Ensure greater equity. You get to a basic value there. It also includes, you know, some brushing a little bit on the statistics, but frankly, if you have more stronger statistics that actually communicate 4 of our 6 schools are above, you know, recommended capacity. If you can actually provide stats like that in order to make the case for greater equity, that's even better. But note that I do have, you know, some basic stats and a strong values-oriented pitch within that. Basic repairs. Jake talked about this earlier. We're seeing more and more that, especially as we get out of the recession, you know, people are thinking about the fact that, hey, we haven't had a school bond in a while. Maybe we've been focusing more on operations. There's a lot of deferred maintenance. Now is the time to start dealing with all of that stuff that was put off when we couldn't afford it during the recession. They want to see action on that. So this bond measure will allow the school district to make basic, large-scale repairs to school buildings, much like you might make to your own house. This includes heating, ventilation, air conditioning, roofing, and plumbing. And just like with your own home, it will cost the school district more to fix these problems later if we don't take care of them today. This is just communicating and storytelling at a very basic level. You're comparing your situation to what everyone else has to deal with, whether it be, you know, their home or frankly even a rental unit or a car. I mean, you know, it's just common sense. If you don't take care of something, it's going to break. So trying to reach people down at their level and demonstrating that shared perspective is critically helpful as you're thinking about how to pass a bond. Next one. Teachers know. Going back to the spokespersons that are so popular. I mean, and I will say this. Teachers, when I think about all of the work I do, whether it be for bonds, school work, or anything else for that matter, it's always, frankly, a fight between teachers and firefighters. Both are really beloved. So if you have a teacher talking about your bond, if you have a firefighter talking about the safety within your school buildings, you are in good stead. So having them tell the narrative, have them tell the story. You know, as a teacher, we need your help. Many of our school buildings are outdated. Classrooms are too small and are in need of major renovation. This bond will bring better lighting, more access to 21st century technology, and ensure our kids' classrooms have the most up-to-date education approaches possible. So next one, safety. Talked a bit about this. Fire. This bond will help keep children and staff safe by adding or updating fire alarms and fire suppression systems in schools across the district. Boom, simple, done. It's, you know, there's, as I said, nothing more basic than ensuring the safety of students and staff. And if your bond does that, that's something that you should be communicating to your community. Next one, security. And you know, as horrible as I will say it, I mean, it's President Obama is right. It's just, it is awful that we almost every month or more have to deal with another school shooting across this country. But the fact is that it is far more present as a result in your community's minds. And so making it clear to folks that a school building that hasn't had a serious renovation in 80 years needs to be updated to help deal with those potential threats. strikes a chord. It certainly strikes a chord with parents, and I think it can easily strike a chord with folks who aren't even connected to the schools. It's just a basic. And we have them right here at home. I mean, Umpqua Community College is a great example. And it's a responsibility. This is not just safety, it's responsibility. We have a core responsibility as a community to make sure our students are safe. So you can communicate multiple different values. And I wouldn't shy away from this. I mean, this is something, I mean, it's hard to talk about, but it's something you need to talk about as, you know, stewards of our children's education. And then earthquake. Again, as you think about, you know, the New Yorker article about the Seaside, and all the other schools across our community, across our state, frankly, people get it. This is front and center in folks' minds. They know that we are due. And when you're talking about the need to make sure that school buildings are up to date and reflect modern, you know, safety standards when it comes to earthquakes, they get it. And it's even better because now you can also talk about how the state is providing you additional funding potentially to help meet those demands as well. Which gets to one of the next points here. I don't know if it's this slide, will be the next one. But showing the voters the ROI. Talking about what's this going to mean for the community in sort of the aspirational, the aspirational piece to all this. If you have a vocational technical center, I would definitely be talking about it, especially today when you're thinking about how college is so expensive. People are having a hard time affording the education they need to get a good paying job. Talking about how you can help provide some of those skills in the K through 12 setting, people like that. They dig that. And frankly, that's both parents and that is folks who are older, who no longer have kids in school or never had kids in school. And talking about how you're helping to make your students career ready. Next one, property values. This one goes frankly straight to the people who don't have vote in the school system. But talking about how this is going to, when you invest in schools, studies show you're investing in better property values. You're investing in the strength of your community, showing them that they're going to see a return on their investment when they raise their taxes in order to fund better schools and better facilities. Next one, technology. It's not a hard case to make that technology is ever changing, and it's changing more and more rapidly. Making sure that your students and staff have access to up-to-date technology so that they can have the skills and have the experience they need to go on to, whether it be, frankly, community college, or a career, is something that people understand. Because, I was having this conversation the other day, even 10 years ago, none of us had smartphones. Technology is really changing at a rapid pace, and it's important to make that you need to update your wiring, you need to update your hardware, your computers, what have you. And then lastly, you do it for a 21st century education. We're no longer the 20th century. This is not the 1990s anymore. In some of our buildings, it's no longer World War II. We need to have facilities that reflect today's day and age. So the message goes, we need to make sure students have access to 21st century classrooms that give them an opportunity to thrive. Again, weaving in that core value. This means creating an environment and atmosphere that helps students succeed, including greater access to and use of technology in the classroom, improved energy efficiency, acoustics, meeting the needs of students with special needs, and greater access to external light. Again, just communicating those core things that help students get ahead today. And then lastly, ensuring that you are demonstrating that you are good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And that starts just by saying there are built-in accountability steps such as independent auditing and citizen oversight specifically designed to make sure that tax dollars are spent as promised. I want to emphasize, no one knows that you regularly are audited. No one knows. It's sad, but it's true. So reminding them at every opportunity, up to and including in the ballot language, that you are going to be regularly audited is fine and frankly necessary, because it's just not something that people think about. But it also is talking about efficiencies. It's saying, it goes back to those basic repairs. We need to take care of our AC or our heating unit because it is clanking, it's out of date, and it might blow up at any second. Part of that is, saying, well, hey, we're going to get a new one, and it's going to reduce our energy costs. And that's money that we can then plow back into the classroom so that our students have a better chance of success. So it's identifying ways to make the case that by replacing, building, renovating a building, you are going to have more money available that can go to programs, which frankly is where people want it to go. And then lastly, talking about the state. This one's relatively new because in the past we didn't really have this. But now that the state is offering monies to schools to help deal with things like seismic stability, you can say, hey, we're going to get some money from the state and it's going to offset your costs. We are looking at every way to make sure that we are asking you for the bare minimum we need to get the maximum potential for our kids in our schools. Thinking about it that way, if there are grants, if there's a foundation, any sort of means that you can use to demonstrate that you are being very cognizant of the fact that, frankly, people are still struggling. I mean, yes, the economy is doing better, but in focus group after focus group and poll after poll that I do today, you'll sit down with the average Oregonian, average Washingtonian, Montanan, Idahoan, and they'll say, well, I'm not seeing it. My wages have been flat. My costs have gone up. Gas has gone down, thankfully, but almost everything else, costs have gone up. Cost of higher education's gone up. Stock market's down, so my retirement's down. I am not seeing an improvement for myself. And so for you all, when you're out there having conversations with your electorate, with residents, to say, I get that, I hear that, and here's what we're doing to make sure that we are limiting our ask, people appreciate that, and it's something that goes a long way during a campaign. And so here's how you would distill it down into a basic 15-second elevator speech. If you are a school board member, this is what I would want you to be saying when a bond is on the ballot, frankly, in a checkout line. When you're advocating, you want to say this bond is necessary in order to ensure our students graduate ready to compete in the worldwide economy. It addresses critical problems, including chronic overcrowding and deferred maintenance, and helps keep our children and staff safe in the case of an emergency such as a fire or active shooter situation. Plus, it's accountable to taxpayers addressing problems now so they don't cost more later. You see how I've woven every single one of those basic facts, a lot of basic values, into one short, concise statement. Now, and I will be the first one to say that is pollster speak. Folks like Jake here, can help translate that into a little bit more fluid conversation, whether it be for a mailer or for door knocking or what have you, phone calls. But you want to keep it simple, concise, and you want to identify the key priorities that you want to achieve through your bond. Other pieces to think about. So it's not just the messaging, it's also using, and this is where you really get into the polling. This is a battery that I will typically use. Other people do it in different ways, to each their own. Point is, it's not just understanding the values that matter to people, it's not just understanding the statistics that matter to people. It's understanding, again, going back to that fact that people are still, they're still having hard times, understanding what they're willing to pay. You can have a conversation about, do we consolidate or do we not consolidate? Do we reconfigure grade configurations or not? Do we provide vocational training or not? But what it really comes down to is how you work it into what people are willing to pay. And so in a typical survey, we'll want to understand where is that price sensitivity point? At what point do voters say, no, I can't do that anymore. I can't pay $8.33 per month. I can't pay $5.58 per month. We'll try and identify the bond level that matters most, and that reaches to a threshold that we think is viable, and then we'll go with that. And you don't want to go any higher because then people might start turning away. And I'll give you this typical advice that we have. When you're thinking about a bond and you do a poll, what I'm typically looking for is overall support at around 55% or higher. I'm looking at strong support, those who say I'm voting yes strongly, at around 40% or higher. And I'm looking at strong opposition to be muted at about 25% or less. Reason why I want those higher numbers on the yes side is because when you will typically expect for any tax measure, whether it be local or statewide, support to drop as you get closer to election day, because they'll look at their wallets and say, I can't afford this. And so you want to make sure you're getting to the right price point where you're going to lose the fewest number of people so that you don't get below 50 plus 1. And that's why you want to have strong support as high as it is, because frankly, the more people you have to move from a yes, not strong stance into a strong stance, the harder it is. Because you got to do persuasion there too, and you might have to reach out to undecided voters. It's just a more expensive proposition, and it's more difficult to do. So next, just an example really quickly of some good caption and questions. I will note, remember, you only have 10 words for your caption, you have 20 words for your question, and Oregon law basically makes it so you can't really fiddle with much of these, if anything. There are a few words that you can fiddle with, and the structure you can fiddle with. So in this case, for this particular school bond, we identified safety was a concern, that we needed to, as part of the bond, repair, rebuild, and construct schools. We need to get to the most expensive pieces of your bond, so talk about those. And then, as part of it, we are updating classrooms. So bonds to increase safety, repair, rebuild, construct schools, update classrooms. Trying to bring it back to the basics of what you're trying to do in terms of your students. Making people think about students as they're looking at those. And I can tell you, after numerous focus groups, that frankly, and there's a lot of time where voters won't go beyond the caption and the question. They'll read those and then they'll make a decision. They won't look at your voter pamphlet statements. They might have thrown out the mail. They might not be on social media. But these are the two things you are guaranteed people are going to look at. So making sure that they are as well constructed as you possibly can within the rule of law is critical. Next piece, shall district increase safety, repair, replace schools, update classrooms, technology, issue $1 million, XXX million in general obligation bonds, audits and oversight required. Typically I'll see bond counsel try and flip that, so you start with what it's going to cost and then you go to what it's paying for. I would push to flip that around. Start with what you're paying for and then go what it's going to cost, because you want to get people hooked on the fact that, oh, this is going to pay for safety. Oh, this is going to pay for those needed repairs that they've been talking about. Oh, I get it. Updating classrooms and technology, I want to do that. And then you talk about what it's going to cost, and then you finish with, oh yeah, and by the way, whatever that cost was, it's going to be spent accountably, it's going to be audited, and it's going to be oversight that's required. So that's how we do it, and that's how you think about this. Again, it's not just the policy, it's not just going by textbook, it's thinking about how do we structure the narrative, because there's narrative potential even in this. Next slide, almost done here. One way to think about the narrative is to use your narrative, is to use it in voter pamphlet statements. So these will be informed by all of the work that you've done, your community outreach, your visioning, your polling. All of that will inform what you put into your voter pamphlet statements. These are some of the most critical things that you will do, because there's a chance that people might read them after they've gone through the caption and title. And I wouldn't hesitate to get a lot of them. Don't get one, don't get two, get 10. I mean, how much are they? Like $250?
Depends,
Yeah.
but they're a lot cheaper than the other ways to communicate.
Yeah. So, I mean, figure out those spokespersons, those message delivery vehicles that Jake was talking about earlier, and have them each tell a story. Have them each explain why your bond is necessary within that voter pamphlet statement. And frankly, repetition is your friend. So, they can all have a different story. They can focus on different things, but have them repeat. Your campaign is writing them. So finding a way to make sure that as, the story is told, but it's told using the same values, statistics, and message points that have been identified throughout the course of your effort to make sure that you're telling the same story over and over again. If you are not, by the end of your campaign and education effort, bored out of your mind with the case that you have had to make to voters, you have not been talking about it enough. So next piece here, let's go to the next one. And you have to think about it, because every single day is a messaging opportunity. Every single one. Before you even think about a demographic study, before you even think about a facilities assessment, every day is a messaging opportunity. You should be sitting down with your school board, with key advocates, and you need to be saying to yourselves, what are we hearing from our community? Where do we think we can meet them where they are? How do we then structure our bond, and then how do we talk about this consistently over a 2-year period, maybe? About trying to build the case for why this thing is necessary. So every PTA event, every board meeting, you can go to chamber meetings. You can go to Jake was talking about numerous other meetings you can do. But you always need to be out there, and you need to be thinking when you're at these meetings about a number of different things. And I've listed out some of the key points. So what are the problems you are trying to solve through your bond? You need to be communicating that succinctly, not in a lot of sentences. What are the goals and aspirations you are attempting to achieve by solving said problems? What spokespersons or stories can you have told that help bring attention to your effort? Again, teachers, students, former students who have gone to college and said, gosh, I wish our buildings had this. Thinking about it that way. I'm from Lake Oswego, so I just have our paper in there, but what would the Lake Oswego Review headline be if a board member said X? Or if someone from the school said Y, or parents said Z? Thinking about how that headline is going to be and what you're going to do to make sure that you are pivoting accordingly. Or if you're thinking about rolling out a plan, making sure, thinking about, okay, what will that headline say? Is that good for us or bad for us as we're thinking about a bond? And if you have, hopefully not, a paid opposition campaign to contend with, what will the other side say? Thinking about, again, going back to what Jake said, this is going to cost money, or it's going to cost jobs. It's going to not be spent accountably. Just thinking about all that and thinking about what your retort is. But you have to be careful when you're thinking about that. This is like some of the basic, communications 101 stuff that frankly Jake does a lot better than I do because he has to deal with candidates and folks much more frequently. I just test the messaging. But you don't be dismissive. You don't say, Facebook, people on Facebook seem fired up, you shouldn't be fired up. You don't dismiss things, you acknowledge it. You say, thank you for your question. Thank you for sharing your story. I understand your concern. And then you move to the next point when you're talking with these folks. You say, you reframe the question to your ground. Your question is really about, I think we can all agree that the challenge before us is, making sure, again, that you're demonstrating empathy, that you're listening, and that you are not being dismissive of your constituents' point of view. Because nothing will set them off more than, as leaders in your community, you not being perceived to listen to them. And then pivot to your message. You've identified, you said you've acknowledged them, you've reframed their question, and then you pivot to your message. We can all agree that X, here's where we try and meet X. Our plan is designed to give every student Y. So you can see the flow here in terms of how you want to develop your conversations with people within your community. And then lastly, this is a simple message box exercise right here. When we are working on a campaign with candidates or on a ballot measure campaign statewide, this is what we'll sort of develop to say, and all of these flow together into a central message that focuses on outcomes, not process. You have leadership at the top. Explain the goal and the vision that you might have to achieve it. Key issues, always connect back to that central messaging theme. Contrast, show the impacts of the wrong approach on students in the community. And I think in this case it would be something like, if we don't do something right now, our current facilities will not be able to give students the 21st century education that they need. And then finally, appealing to those core values. And that's frankly one of the first things you need to do. Because that's how people think. That's the lens through which they make their decisions. So when you appeal to those core values and then explain the goal, the key issues and the contrast, hopefully you will be meeting folks where they are. And again, you're not fitting that square peg into a round hole as you're thinking about the narrative and how to talk with your electorate. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jake for concluding thoughts.
And I think we want to get into a conversation with you guys pretty quickly. I'll just say, a few key points. Start early. I feel like almost always people approach me when it's too late in the process. It's like, oh, this is happening in 6 months, and we should probably do something about that. I'm like, yeah, we probably should have. Maybe 6 months or a year ago. So start early. It's a long build to sprint to the finish. You'll see that what we talked about today is a lot of preparation work and outreach work. That feels tedious and endless until you get to the last 30 days and suddenly everyone is very, very engaged in the election because they've now gotten their voter pamphlet statement and their ballot and they want to know right then. So you are putting in place the building blocks to drink from that fire hose during the last month when suddenly everyone cares a lot about your bond and wants to talk about it. The preparation work positions you to take advantage during that dynamic. And then last, choose wisely. You only have so much time and resources. We don't have limitless lots of money. We don't have our secret army of clone volunteers that we can bust out of the closet to knock every door in your community. So choosing what you can do with what you have is a really critical part of this conversation. So with that, let's dive in a little bit more to the actual situation you all are facing on the ground, and then we can give you some help. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this around.
Actually, I just like that. Since you have your contact, are you going to share these slides on the RFPA website?
Yeah, I believe we have shared them. We'll start sharing this one. Yeah, all of this has been provided at the conference, so this should be available to you guys after the presentation.
Yeah, I think there's a question back here.
Describe the difference between the kitchen cabinet and the screening committee and who's on both, what types of individuals?
I would say those are all just kind of terms of art. I mean, I don't want to I'll create you guys an elaborate organizational chart for, at the end of the day, it's probably going to be like 5 to 10 people really working. The only piece I'll just add there is different people will come to that table for different reasons. So for instance, I could imagine, I'm sure we all have these people, the elected official who wants to look good by supporting schools, but then when it actually gets time for them to do stuff, they're suddenly really busy. Or the business leader who really supports the schools but doesn't want to actually talk to any of their other fellow business leaders about it because those conversations are too difficult. And so as you structure that committee, think about plugging people into roles that they will actually serve. Maybe the point of that elected official is for them to be the face of the campaign, or for them to lend their endorsement and that kind of credibility to you. Or maybe for that business community, it's not that they're going to go out and talk to those business community people. They're going to help you figure out the right way to talk to that audience. So that's the only piece I'll just add is create the structure that are the titles that make sense, and just recognize that people are coming with different time and different abilities and different assets they bring to that table. It's kind of figuring out how to structure it that makes the most advantage.
Behind you.
Here you go.
Hey, could you direct us to some websites or some concrete information in regards to the collateral benefits of passing a bond issue, i.e. the economic development that also happens in your community? I think myself as an educator, I recognize that, I agree with that. I would say the same about a hospital being built or a library being built. But I don't know, we live in a small rural town in eastern Oregon where they haven't had school construction in a long, long time. And I want to be able to articulate to the 80% of our voters who will not directly benefit, but indirectly benefit. So to give them some hard data or hard information about the collateral benefits of passing a bond issue.
Absolutely. So I'll give the expensive way to do that and the free way. Probably more likely for you guys. In a large public project, you may actually take the step to pay someone to do a study of it. So like when they were talking about rebuilding the I-5 bridge across the Columbia, there were a lot of economic analyses done. Unless you have $20,000 to $50,000 to spend on such a study, it's gonna be hard to come by. So what you're forced to do is kind of the four-person's version, which is take some different pieces of data out there and pull them together. So data about how having a skilled workforce or quality education or STEM programs, how those make a difference in terms of the workforce and training. There are some rules of thumb about X $1 million number, size of a project translates into this many construction jobs. So you can find those out there on the internet. Those are some of the indicators. I will say though, it is a little piecemeal. I ran a pool bond to rebuild a pool in Newburgh, and the steering cabinet told me, I guess I messed up names. The kitchen cabinet told me that they absolutely knew that a community pool increased property values. And so we could absolutely say that in a campaign. And I gotta tell you, I spent about 10 hours doing research online to find any data. It turns out even a pool in your backyard doesn't necessarily raise your pool value.
Yeah.
I don't know where they got that from. But what I did get was I got the largest realtor in town to give us a quote saying, when we have a community pool, it helps attract people here and helps us grow this community and make our property value. So I may have not gotten an official study, but I had a realtor who said it. So think about those pieces. It may be taking some specific data points, maybe finding someone in the community like the head of the Chamber of Commerce. In an ideal world, you could pay to do that analysis, but it's just going to cost some money.
So I would add two things to that. So I did the polling for that pool bond, and that's actually off subject a little bit. That is an excellent example of starting below those thresholds that frankly I discussed in terms of assessing viability, but having an amazing door-to-door campaign and a group of very, very passionate volunteers who were smart in terms of the way they went out, knocked on the right doors, and made it happen. I mean, when I think about the grades of bonds, because there are grades of bonds, a pool bond is one of the hardest bonds to pass.
I think so.
Like, it just, without fail. A school bond is actually much easier to pass because people see the direct connection in terms of what it means for their community. Pool, unless you get that realtor, it's a little bit harder. But that goes to another point that I did want to say, which is what Jake was saying is, yes, you can pay to have a firm go out and do that economic study, but there is quite a bit available on when you just go in and do some targeted Google searching. And I'm serious when I say that. I mean, there are a lot of studies out there that you can find if you spend a good amount of time looking for it that can help make your case. And it shouldn't be broad searches. Think about what you are trying to achieve through your bond, whether it be developing lab space or a vocational training center, updated technology, and then try and target your searches that way, and you can typically find something that will help validate what you're trying to say. And make sure you cite it. Yes?
I was just wondering if you guys have any great words of wisdom in terms of how to counter the comments that you'll hear about schools have enough money already, they just need to use what they have more wisely.
Okay. That's a good question.
I make a lot more money, yeah. Why do you start with that?
All right. You know how it's said that in any typical community there are, on average, 20 to 30% who have kids in the schools? There is also typically, and every community is different, but on average there are about 30% of people who are going to say that, and they're going to say that no matter what you do. And so those are the no voters, frankly. Those are the people who you should have something set up for them, but know that you're not going to move them, and frankly spending time trying to move them is a waste, because there are people out there who are not connected to schools, who are not thinking about schools, who are more deserving of your time in terms of the case you need to make. In terms of answering that question, I will go back to some of the things that we discussed earlier. So going to this piece right here. Some of these messages right here can help be the right retort. You're not going to persuade them. But if you're in a room with someone who's saying that, and maybe their friend standing next to them and their friend isn't quite so sure, this might make their friend think twice. So just having good examples of how you are spending dollars right. If you've had a bond previously done, if you're doing sort of like the evergreen schedule in terms of bonding, I would say if you can point to projects that were completed on time and under budget. Just think out of the box, any way that you can make to say, no, that's not true, we've always been very good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And I wouldn't say, no, that's not true, that sort of violates everything I just said. But I would say, where is it? I would say, thank you for your question, I understand your concern. And then move through. But you get my drift. Just having those talking points available, acknowledging their concern, reframing the question to be, and we always want to make sure that our money is being accountably spent, which is why we made sure that money was spent on time and on budget, and under budget.
Yeah, I think that's really solid, and having those specific activities and examples of what you've done to be close stewards of money. There is one resource, I believe, through the Chalkboard Project. I hope this is still updated, where they do some analysis about districts and what percentage goes in the classroom versus administrative. And so that may be some data you can point them to and say, look, it really does go to the kids. Like there's no secret slush fund for us to go party or something. The other thing I'll just add here is you're asking people to pay more taxes. And there is always, as Ben said, going to be a chunk of people that do not want to pay more taxes, no matter how many benefits, how awesome schools are going to be, they don't want to pay more. And that's the end of the conversation for them. And that's a piece that I'll add about the communication strategy is in a presidential or governor's race or some of these other big races, you'll see kind of broad brush messaging through TV, through radio, you're hitting every voter. Ironically, in a campaign like this, there's a lot to be said for not doing that kind of broad brush communication and just focusing on the people who are going to vote yes. And maybe those no voters just don't hear about the election, don't show them on election day. But if you are out there broadcasting on TV and having it everywhere in front of people, then those no voters are going to get really mad about this tax increase and get their buddies to all show up and vote too. And so having a more targeted, focused campaign, particularly around taxes, is going to be to a big benefit.
Is there a question?
I forget where it was, but in a couple slides, there was a relationship that showed between capital improvement and the word equity. I'm struggling. Can you go one level deeper in how you're messaging? Equity is a great word, but why are you messaging equity and capital improvement? How are you doing?
The way I think about equity when we're thinking about capital improvements, let's say schools, in this case it would be, I think a good example would be overcrowding in school. Let's say you're in a demographic, let's go back to the East Helena example. The Valley in Helena has schools that are excused, so that's actually not the best example. In either case, let's just think about it this way. If you have a school that is bursting at the seams, if it has too many students and as a result, not enough people can get into varsity sports, you have less access to maybe certain clubs or not enough sections for certain classes because there's not enough space. The end result is a lack of equity because not everybody can take part or not everyone has equal access to or equitable access to those things. By building another high school or junior high or what have you and reducing the enrollment size of that school, now more people have access to varsity. Now more people have access to the upper tiers of some club or what have you. That's a way to ensure greater equity. Does that answer your question?
Okay. I took it in a different way, but that's
Yeah, well, and I might touch on that, because I think there are kind of two levels to this conversation. One is the general point that in America, education is a great equalizer, right? It creates opportunity for all people, regardless of your circumstance and background, and that if you don't have a quality education, quality school in your community, then you are robbing those kids of that potential. What you may be referencing, I think, as you all are probably aware more than most of the public, is that we are really moving into a much more in-depth conversation about equity in the state as we grow increasingly diverse. I think that is a more complex conversation, particularly in a campaign electoral setting, because even compared to the general population, your voters are going to be older and whiter than the community around them. And so the voters coming to actually vote may not be as far along on the concerns about equity as some others in the broader community are. And so I think it's an important conversation to have. I think I'm not telling you all anything if you're dealing with this in your district, that it is a very tricky conversation to have. So for instance, I can think about talking about that the facility improvements will give new opportunities to English language learners if you're adding in language facilities, or that it's creating access for programs in certain schools around the district that necessarily have those programs. But I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know, that conversation gets very tricky very quickly, because then it's like, well, but what about my school? And that tends to be the kind of approach. It's just like localized thing. So I think there are ways to approach this conversation. I think that's why it's really critical to do polling to understand where your voters are, so you can have that conversation the right way.
And that's an excellent point, because I think Jake's right. I mean, equity, I think, is an important conversation for us to have, but at the same time, I would say opportunity, drive, success. These are values that I think are more resonant, particularly in today's day and age, when people are thinking about their, the struggle to remain or climb into the middle class. Things like that, I think, have more value and reach further than equity. But again, every community is different. That's why you poll and you try and figure that piece out.
Coming from a small district, I almost don't want to ask the question about surveying because of the sticker shock fear. So if I was to survey, we have 1,500 voters, what's the range of cost associated with a survey?
I would say don't survey. It's too small. It's just too small for me to get, make sure that I'm contacting the right number of voters. Incidence rates are much lower now than they used to be. Polling definitely is still an accurate way to go about doing things. It's a needed way, but especially when you're dealing with 1,500 voters, some of whose phone numbers I might not have, it's just a tougher proposition.
Sorry, not me too.
Last call.
But I would say, I would go out and have those listening sessions. I would try and get as many of your community members to go. I wouldn't hold just one, I would hold numerous ones. And really try and get a sense for where folks are, how they think about their schools, etc. You don't have to do it just for polling.
I'm in the same situation, a really small district. We had 1,000 turnout for our last bond measure that failed. We're about 50%, so we're just almost there. And we're rural, and so we kind of know this demographic that we're after. So we've been having debates, and we're going for the major election. It's a really tight timeline, but we're going for it. So we know it's all grassroots, and we don't have a newspaper. We don't really have TV, and this rural aspect, like how do we go out and reach some of these farmers? We don't really have industry. We don't have a town hall. We don't have a courthouse. So even reaching some of the people that we want to reach, I don't know what we're going to do. And they're not on Facebook. Yeah.
Jake?
We don't have cows.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
Grassy farmers.
and so let me take a couple parts. I think there is this question of how do you gather data in these kind of situations. And I'll just kind of briefly walk you through like a focus group, which Ben understands a lot better than I do, and how maybe you could do something on your own, kind of like a focus group, which would lead literally just trying to get in a room 5 to 10 people of a kind of target demographic. So maybe trying to get 5 voters, 5 farmers who are undecided to come and sit down with you for an hour and have an ongoing conversation. Really try to start with where they're at on the issue, what influences them, what they know about the issue, if I gave you this information. And so you kind of have a directed conversation. And obviously the disadvantage of that over a poll is it's not statistically representative, right? We all remember back from our stats classes that the reason you do a poll is to get a big enough sample so you feel like it's actually representative of the public. Well, 5 people probably aren't necessarily representative of the public, but it is a good indication of what is this kind of people, what does that type of demographic think about the issue, so you can at least have those conversations. Now, how to reach those voters, particularly when we're not all living in a city together, that's, again, why that mail is really good stuff to send out. I think having the community conversations, I'd also try to think about how do these people already engage in the community? Is it going out to the Farm Bureau? Are they actively engaged in a 4-H club? Is there an opportunity to go to the county fair? Maybe this summer if your ballot's in November. Go where they already are engaged in the community and try to have the conversation at their level. And ideally, maybe have someone who is a trusted messenger of that community. Try and get a fellow farmer to go out and do the Farm Bureau presentation, or have the business leader go to that Chamber of Commerce conversation. You really have to kind of start to try and get creative about mapping the existing relationships and networks in your community and how you can tap into them. And that's all about finding the people who can bring you into those conversations, give you credibility, and let you get your message out.
One example of how that's been done here.
I just wanted to give a quick comment of something we're doing, because we have to go after this May election too, and the state matching grant, those kind of things. We have a total of 460 voters registered in our school district, so we're really big in that. But what I've actually done, and it's been a whirlwind of 3 weeks right now, but I've already been meeting with about 6 community groups, and what I've done before each meeting that I've gone to is I've contacted one person that I know is a member of that group that I have good communication with, and explained to them what's going on. And then what I've asked them to do is said, when I get done speaking, would you mind, as a respected member of this group, standing up and saying, could we take a straw poll of our group and just see who's in favor and who's against it? And it gives me great feedback when I walk out of the room of where I stand with people, what's going on with that group, and how do I approach that group over the next month and a half of getting our bond passed. That's just with a very small group that I've been able to do in a very quick amount of time to get really good feedback of where we stand and what I need to do as the leadership of the school district end, and work with my board and our committees to go out and who we have to talk to and who we just need to move away from in that respect. So.
One thing about that's another great use of your elected officials, because they likely have a fairly healthy email list of people in your district. And so maybe they'd send out an email on your behalf. That doesn't take too much effort on their part, but it's a great way to reach those voters.
One thing you didn't talk about is voter history. Assuming that you have a strong voter history in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, when a lot of schools were being built in the country, is that a compelling message for those swing voters, the naysayers, to talk about the investment that your parents, your grandparents made in this community, and it's our time to do likewise? Does that have any compelling movement on those swing voters?
Possibly. If you can poll on that, that's always good.
That's why you can afford it.
The way I've always tried to frame that argument is this is a public good or something that benefits the community, and we're going to lose it. Actually, that was a big part of why I won that pool campaign. Was I sat down in my kitchen cabinet, which were all regular users of the pool, and they wanted to talk about how awesome all the things at the pool were going to be after we got this bond passed, and then we're going to have a lazy river that everyone can ride their inner tubes around, and new equipment in the athletic facility, and how the polo team wasn't going to have to fake. Anyway, they had a whole bunch of really cool things about us, and I was like, no. The only thing we're going to talk about in this campaign is if we don't pass the bond, the pool will close. We are going to have to close the pool because the maintenance situation's gotten so bad.